Leonard Nimoy's Star Trek 2009 role created a glaring cast problem I'm more than happy to accept. When J.J. Abrams rebooted Star Trek in 2009, he didn't just introduce a new timeline and a younger Enterprise crew. He resurrected something far more powerful: the mythology and emotional continuity bridging the old and the new. At the center of that bridge stood Leonard Nimoy, returning as Spock Prime in what would become one of the franchise's most important legacy performances. His appearance was poetic, symbolic, and deeply reverent, but it also created a massive casting problem, one so obvious that fans and even the movie's writers acknowledged it. And yet, for all the disruption it caused, it's a problem I'll happily accept every time. Nimoy's involvement both elevated the film and quietly undermined one of its core goals: establishing the Kelvin timeline cast as fully independent successors to the original icons. His presence affected character arcs, narrative weight, and even audience expectations in ways the filmmakers could never fully avoid. But as far as I'm concerned, those consequences were worth it. Because Nimoy didn't just appear in the film, he anointed it. The Kelvin timeline was meant to start fresh. Until Nimoy walked on screen, the 2009 reboot was designed to solve the franchise's biggest problem: how to revive Star Trek for a mainstream audience without burying newcomers under 40-plus years of continuity. Abrams' solution was elegant: create a branching timeline, keep the canon intact, and free the new cast: Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, John Cho, and Anton Yelchin to reinterpret their roles without comparison paralysis. At least, that was the intention. Then Leonard Nimoy arrived. His role wasn't a cameo. It wasn't even just a symbolic handoff. Spock Prime was central to the plot. He personally guided Kirk, catalyzed Spock's emotional journey, and explained the entire logic of the alternate timeline. Nimoy became the narrative skeleton key for the entire film. And with that, something shifted. The new cast was no longer simply the next generation of TOS characters. They were now sharing the stage with the original torchbearer, who brought 40 years of emotional resonance with him. That wasn't the clean break Abrams envisioned, but it absolutely made the movie richer. The problem: one actor suddenly outshined the entire cast. Here's the unavoidable truth: Leonard Nimoy stole the movie. Not because the Kelvin actors weren't brilliant. They absolutely were. But because Nimoy's presence carried historical gravity no reboot could compete with. When he stepped out of the shadows in that cave on Delta Vega and said, "I am Spock," everything changed. Suddenly, the movie wasn't just a new beginning. It became a continuation of a saga fans had lived with for decades. Even Pine's Kirk, energetic, rebellious, brilliantly recalibrated, had to orbit around Spock Prime's revelations. Zachary Quinto's Spock made huge emotional strides, but it was Nimoy's version who delivered the deepest philosophical insights. The film's emotional climax wasn't Nero's defeat. It was the mind-meld flashback narrated by Nimoy, and later, his meeting with Quinto's Spock. For a reboot trying to establish autonomy, having one legendary actor overshadow the rest of the cast was a real complication. But it was a complication worth embracing. Nimoy didn't just play Spock. He validated the entire reboot. Every reboot fears one thing: alienating the core fans. Nimoy destroyed that fear in one stroke. The moment he said, "thrusters on full," longtime fans understood. If Leonard Nimoy believed in this new version of Star Trek, then it was legitimate. His blessing wasn't just spiritual, it was narrative. The Kelvin universe existed because Spock Prime existed. This wasn't a new beginning at all. It was a branching path crafted and sanctioned by the character who embodied Star Trek's heart. No other franchise has pulled this off so cleanly. Imagine if Mark Hamill narrated the opening of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, or if Christopher Reeve guided Henry Cavill's Superman through his first flight. That's the level of mythic endorsement Nimoy gave the Kelvin films. The cast problem was real, but it also made the reboot bulletproof. Quinto's Spock benefited the most yet also faced the most pressure. If anyone stood directly in Leonard Nimoy's long shadow, it was Zachary Quinto. Playing the younger version of a legendary character is one thing. Playing him opposite the original actor is something else entirely. Instead of being allowed to build Spock from the ground up, Quinto had to pivot his performance around Nimoy's. This created a strange dynamic. His emotional arc was influenced, almost dictated, by future Spock's guidance. His chemistry with Kirk developed because Nimoy explained why their friendship mattered. His internal conflict was framed as a response to a destiny Nimoy had already lived. In any other film, this would undermine the new actor. But Quinto rose to the challenge. His Spock didn't feel like an imitation. He felt like a younger man still growing into the legendary calm and wisdom Nimoy embodied. Their interaction became one of the most beautiful cross-generational performances in science fiction cinema. And honestly, that never would have happened without the casting problem Nimoy introduced. The movie became a love letter instead of a replacement. Leonard Nimoy's involvement fundamentally changed Star Trek 2009 from what it was supposed to be, a clean reboot, into something much more emotionally powerful, a tribute. The film's best scenes aren't the action sequences or even the origin story beats. They're the ones steeped in legacy. Spock Prime revealing Vulcan's fate through the mind meld, his reunion with young Spock, his plea for Kirk and Spock to work together, his final log entry echoing TOS's signature optimism. These scenes reframed the entire movie as part of the same overarching narrative fans had followed since 1966. It wasn't just, here's a new Spock. It was, here's the next chapter in Spock's journey. This shift made the Kelvin timeline more meaningful, not less. Yes, it messed with the cast balance. But it also elevated everyone. Once Nimoy appeared, all eyes turned to Quinto's Spock. But Nimoy also unintentionally raised the stakes for the rest of the cast. Suddenly, this wasn't Star Trek, the next attempt. It was a passing of the torch, live on screen, with the original actor watching. Carl Urban responded by delivering one of the most uncanny and heartfelt Dr. McCoy performances imaginable. Chris Pine took Kirk in a bold new direction without mimicking Shatner. Zoe Saldana's Uhura gained emotional depth the original series never gave her. It's no exaggeration to say that Nimoy's presence made everyone better. The reboot cast wasn't just performing for the audience. They were performing for the legacy. Without Nimoy, the Kelvin films would have felt hollow. Even fans who adore the 2009 reboot often admit something. Without Spock Prime, the story works, but it doesn't resonate. Nero's motivation becomes less compelling. Spock's emotional turmoil loses dimension. Kirk's destiny feels less faded and more random. And the connection to classic Trek becomes weaker. Nimoy didn't just act in the film. He gave it weight, history, and purpose. He made the Kelvin universe feel like an extension, not a replacement. And that's why the glaring cast problem was secretly the reboot's greatest asset. A problem I'll happily accept every time. Was it narratively risky to bring back Leonard Nimoy? Absolutely. Did it overshadow the new cast? In many ways, yes. Did it break the illusion of a fully independent reboot? Completely. But would the film have been better without him? Not a chance. The Kelvin timeline works because it honors what came before. Nimoy was the embodiment of that respect. His presence created an imbalance, but an imbalance that made the movie unforgettable. He turned a blockbuster reboot into a multi-generational celebration of Star Trek's soul. The problem